Okay. All right, man. Joining us on today's interview is somebody we just made a comment before we started recording. Why am I wearing a Disney Cruise Line uh, Spirit jersey on the Horrific Network show? It's because I met Bonnie on a Disney cruise that we talked about on our one of our first podcasts of the year. Uh, Fun trip, and our whole table really had a common interest in sci-fi and horror. And Bonnie has written a really rad book that you can get on Amazon right now, Virgil Team, and we are going to talk to her all about that right now. So help me out if you are watching and or listening on the podcast to us welcoming author Mrs. Bonnie Blevins. Welcome. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. It's great to see you again.
Yes, for sure. And you have a good holiday and everything?
Yeah, we did.
Right
It went
on,
by
right
way too
on.
quick.
It did. It's always funny being in education how like we look at it like having all this time off, but then it goes by super fast and now we're back at it. So it's like, where did it go? It feels like forever ago, even though it was only a few weeks ago.
For sure. And
Um,
then the work weeks grind by.
yes, 100%. Um, but this book, man, Virgil Team, you are a former member of the military, and you had said that this novel that you came up with was kind of like very much inspired in that vein, but it was like more sci-fi and stuff. Tell everybody like what the overarching theme of your story is.
Okay. So, Virgil Team, like you said, I started writing snippets of it when I was in the US Army as a military police officer. So, the main character is a female MP. No, she is not me. Um, I get that question a lot. So she's a female MP and she has extraordinary abilities. She can heal and she can talk telepathically, and she discovers more of what she can do as the book goes on. She
Hmm.
is trying to remain hidden at the beginning of the book. She joins the military because she wants to be able to use her abilities, but she doesn't want to end up being a lab rat. And
Gotcha.
during this, the start of the book, she ends up having to face a choice of a dying man. Either she heals him and risks revealing herself, or she lets him die. She decides to heal him. Because of that event, she finds herself roped into a black branch, a black operations group called Virgil Team. She joins them, and once she joins them, they end up getting pitted against a group called Cerberus.
Hmm.
And so you follow her from there, learning her abilities, learning to trust this new group of people she's with, while also combating the group that very well may want to use her for what she's been afraid of this whole time.
The way that you say that she doesn't want to use her powers and stuff, it almost there's like a bunch of Marvel, kind of overarching stories that kind of have that same premise of like they have the capability of saving the day, but they won't do it for fear of what's going to happen when they do. Like the X-Men, like that
Mm-hmm.
is always a theme very prevalent in the X-Men, which it's kind of like a dope concept, a real world concept. Like the world doesn't necessarily seem like in today's day and age that they would just welcome a superhero into the mix, regardless of how many people they were trying to help. It seems like that would be the more real logical response, is to be afraid of what people would think versus just openly coming out. So that's kind of cool that
Yeah,
you
for
chose
sure.
to go down the more real world mental kind of. She would be scared at first to tell anybody she has these powers.
Yeah,
What
and
was it
real
like?
world. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I cut you off there.
Real
Sorry about
world definitely ties in a lot because this is just the start of the series I'm going to write, and it's actually called the Evolved One series.
that. Okay.
So, spoiler for your viewers,
Yeah.
he is not going to be the only evolved one that I introduce. But there is going to be a real world theme of when I was an MP and then things I tackle today, the reality that there is hatred for things that you don't understand is very real. That people you don't understand is very real. I have some LGBTQ notes. I have some racism notes. I have some disability notes all throughout the book here and there because they are real world things. Just because these characters are imaginary doesn't mean that what they represent is not.
Oh, for sure. The world needs more than ever, I think, to kind of open the door to all those subsects of groups of people and try harder to kind of make bridges instead of burning them in between the different groups of people. And by the way people have segregated themselves, when you say different groups of people, like you segregate yourself because it makes you feel safe. There needs to be, I think, more effort to make the olive branches come across to let people know that maybe there's bigger groups in which they can feel safe in. So it's cool that even with a story that it sounds like you're making the time to try to include all those different groups of people. So that's pretty cool to see too.
For sure.
The
I appreciate
the
it.
the fact that I was going to say earlier, the fact that you wrote this while you were in the service or began to write this while you were in the service, like how hard is it to, as an author, because would say the inspiration material is there, obviously, if you're in the service and your main character is also military police, you unquestionably have the material being presented to you on a daily basis. But how hard was it to be able to make the time to sit there and actually take the notes and stuff?
So what's funny about it is I actually have some of my original notes, and some of them are actually on the back of a missing vehicle police report. um, because it would happen when I was sitting in my patrol car or sitting at a desk somewhere usually on a midnight shift when things are boring.
Yeah.
And it would just be kind of started as what ifs. If I could do this, what would I be able to do? And
Mm-hmm.
then Kia, my main character, was kind of born from these just abstract ideas I had. So throughout my time as a military police officer, I just kind of wrote these random little stories. Sometimes I'd continue it from the night before. Sometimes I'd start fresh with, I was introduced to a new, like there's a range on there. And I actually
Mm-hmm.
tell a story in the book where she was talking about scrap metal thieves coming off the range. That actually is one of the very few true things in there that actually happened to me as an MP. The first 3 chapters in the book are very strongly influenced by things I went through as an MP. After that, though, is all stuff that I started to come up with and I had to create and be inspired elsewhere outside of my time in the service. But as for finding time in the Army, it was just on mid shifts writing little scrap pieces of paper. It was after my time in the Army where I found this collection of scrap notes and I was like, oh, these don't sound so bad. And I started typing them up and filling in the blanks. And for the longest time, the title of that file on my computer was Stupid Book Idea.
Mm-hmm.
Until about when COVID hit. And I had nothing but time to sit down and kind of polish it off and go from there.
Was being a writer, author, is that something that you've wanted to do like your whole life type of a thing? Is it something that completely your time in the military like ignited that spark? How was the author, um I guess what came first? Was it the military and then you discovered you'd love to write, or have you always loved to write and then you happened to find the military along that path?
Um, so I started writing poetry of all things, thanks to my English teacher in 5th grade. And she encouraged my writing. She said I had a knack for creative writing, and she always encouraged me to keep writing. And so I always had odd odd stories, odd poems, things like that. But I never thought being an author is for me, because I actually saw the Twin Towers fall when I was like 9. I and I come from a family of strong military background, and I can honestly say since I was 9 years old, I wanted to join the military. So I never thought about being an author besides just, I wrote a good poem. Do you want to hear it, to my family? Um, so when I was in the military, and especially as an MP, you come across a lot of stressors and you really need to find an outlet. And
Sure.
writing just happened to be an outlet I carried over from having those teachers that really left a mark on me. And it was born from that. And then in the last year or two, when I finished Virgil Team finally, and I stopped sitting down on it, I was like, you know what, this isn't actually bad, and I really enjoyed doing this. Let me see if I can publish it. And now that I've done it, now that I've gotten a taste for it, I really want to keep doing the author writer path.
That's awesome. That it's always cool when we have people on the show and they're just kind of discovering, like, whether it be directing or writing or painting, whatever the medium is. Um, it's always cool to interview them within the first couple projects because they know that they have so much more now that they've kind of found their niche. They have so much more that they kind of want to do. So it's cool to see you excited about the first one, knowing that you have all these other ideas that you want to get out there. So what is it like, because you had said that this was a project that you went through the publishing process on Amazon yourself, and that is not something that is a first on the show. There's been a few different authors that have done this, and by doing that road has helped them connect with publishers for their like second, third down the line type of books. And so the fact that Amazon allows you to do this is really cool. But I think there are people who still kind of wonder exactly how the whole self publication thing works on Amazon. So how was that process for you? Was it like user friendly, or is it a little bit challenging? I guess what advice would you give, you having now you've now done it and your book is out there on Amazon available? Like, how hard is it for the author, if that's the road that they're going to go, to get their book published, you know, self-published out there on Amazon so people can buy it and check it out?
If I could tell myself two things when I decided to publish Virgil Team, it would be, one, spend the money and get the editor.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
I enjoy writing, but I am not. I'm not an English teacher. I'm not great at grammar. I'll say that. And two, while self-publishing is not easy, it is not as overwhelming as I thought it was.
mm.
Because Virgil Team was actually ready to go out in the time of COVID. So that was what, 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
It was pretty much done then.
Mm,
But I tried getting publishers. I did try to submit to publishing groups time and time again. I think I sent over 15 to 20 publishers. And I all
mm.
got turned down for one reason or another, and nobody really told me why. So at that point, I was like, I tried, whatever. I wasn't aiming to be a published author anyways. I just wrote it for fun anyways. I never wrote it to publish it.
Sure.
But I enjoyed it and I wanted to put it out there. I wanted to have it in my hand, not just on a file. So I started looking up self-publishing, and it seems very overwhelming when you first look at it, because some sites tell you need to have an ISBN, you need to have an LLC, you need to have this, you need to have that. You
Right.
got to get the cover art. And so I knew I could publish through Amazon because I had actually tried to publish a poetry book when I was in the Army.
Hmm.
That was a fantastic fail because while Amazon does give you the ability to publish, it is on you to format it. It is on you to format it for the paper and it's on you to format it for the Kindle. It is also on you to do the cover art. Amazon, if you give it to them, they will post it. It doesn't mean it's going to look good though.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the poetry book, that is the reason why I took it down, because it looks awful. I didn't format it. I had no clue how to format it. I had no clue where to start. So my first order of business was look for a cover artist. And thanks to a website called Fiverr, that's 5 with 2 R's, I found this treasure trove of people, not fellow authors like me, but people who found their niche doing things like graphic design, things like that.
Mm.
And I was able to find a cover artist. So I started there. And her cover art really got me excited for my book. And then I realized on Fiverr, I could find somebody to format it to Amazon's specifications for the paperback, for the Kindle. So I paid those people and had them format it. And I went over it, and another piece of advice for anybody looking to self-publish, always look it over, because the first format job was atrocious. It actually dropped 3 of my chapters from the entire book.
Dang.
Yeah. So that was a wake-up call. I learned a lesson with that. And I found a different person to format it after that. And then once I had that, I was able to go back to Amazon, input the cover art, input the format that they gave me, and the rest of it was easy. Amazon does make it a very easy process. You can adjust how much money you get, how much to charge, where you want to sell it, how you want the book to look and feel. Like for my hardback, I was able to do the matte and then the tan colored pages.
That's so dope. Like,
yeah,
that's got to be a cool feeling that you pick up this book that you wrote. Like, that's pretty rad.
It really is, considering it was just a concept for fun, and
Yeah.
now I have people reading it. It's very fun. But my biggest piece of advice for anybody who wants to self-publish is don't give up, but make sure you do it right. Because I will fully admit, this is on me. I didn't hire an editor because editors can cost like between $500 and $1,000. And
for sure.
Yeah, and like I said, Virgil Team was supposed to just be I just want to put it out there. Well, now that it's out there, now that I've done book signings and I've seen people get excited over it, I'm getting more excited over it. And I always hear, but the grammar could use a little help. And
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I mean, there's only so many times you can read something you wrote and not start skipping, because I know the storyline forwards and backwards. So I missed commas, or I did the wrong word somewhere. So when I'm going forward, now that I know I want to be an author, I want to be a writer, and I want this to be presented well, I will spend the money on an editor. But for somebody starting out, Amazon's a great resource. Spend the money you want to invest in it to get started, and then go from there.
It's interesting how the mind works, because you're either, I think, and I'll probably get flack for this, people who watch it, but you're either like the creative minded, or you are the like number minded kind of person. And I think that even applies to writing in general, because when I'm writing a screenplay, I'm the same way. I will write, but my grammar is terrible. And people who are, acting or volunteering in the films and stuff, when they get a script, it's like an inside joke. They know that the grammar is going to be bad, but they know that, like, hopefully the idea is good. So they don't really care about the grammar being bad. Like, they know what I'm trying to say. And that is something that when you are the writer of it, I think it's easy to kind of just gloss over or like completely forget about, because you're excited about your idea.
Yeah.
So yeah, you need an editor thing, I think, is definitely true, because it's always better to have a second set of eyes look at something unobjectively, because you're going to be biased because it's yours. So to have someone just kind of, not be a dick about it, but kind of rip it apart to the point where all that stuff gets fixed, it is good to have,
For
because
sure.
it
Because
makes it that much.
Yep. Because I wish if I could make a wish when it comes to my book, I wish I could write it as the person, or I wish I could read it as the person who didn't write it.
Mm-hmm.
And to explain that is, I have people who do get excited about it, and that makes me excited about it because I can't read it as somebody who doesn't know what's coming in the next chapter. It doesn't keep
Yeah.
me up at night because I already know. I not only know what's going to happen, I know what's going to happen 3 books down the line. Like,
Yeah.
I know everything about the characters. I know the bloopers, if you shall, about things I was going to write that I didn't. I
Mm-hmm.
really wish I could read it with that fresh set of eyes. One, so I can catch the grammatical errors I'm not going to catch because I just start skimming it at some point. But also so I could
Sure.
enjoy it as that first time reader as well.
Yeah. With that, um, how many books do you think that this whole thing is going to be?
So Virgil Team themselves, at least 2, more than likely 3. I'm working on number 2 right now.
Mm.
But Virgil Team is part of Black Branch, which is a new military branch I created for my book. And in
Mm-hmm.
Black Branch, there's multiple different teams. And I'm hoping that I will continue to write about those teams in the future once I finish Virgil Team's story. I'm not going to pull a Stephen King on anybody and start writing about Virgil Team, leave you on a cliffhanger and go off on another tangent.
Right.
But Virgil Team for sure is going to have probably 3, and then I'm going to start introducing the other teams. And I want to start writing about them and writing about other evolved ones. Before I get to them, though, I do have at least 2 other purely fantasy sci-fi book ideas that I would
Mm-hmm.
really like to explore. So hopefully many more books in the future.
What with this, the Virgil Team and the evolved ones, is the way that you say their names. You say it with like the conviction of like these are inspired. Like there's some deep rooted like thought I can tell just by the way that you say the names. Like where does the inspiration for this come from? Because like evolved ones, the way that you say it, like that just sounds like an X-Men universe. I know I said X-Men earlier, but like it does. Like it sounds like a universe that has like just, multiple, dozens upon dozens of different like characters in your head that you could, line them all up and pull from, this giant catalog. So what is the inspiration, uh the sci-fi side inspiration? I know the MP inspiration, but what is the evolved one inspiration? What was it that you loved that you are pulling it from?
So Kia is definitely the one who started it off. She's the main character.
Mm-hmm.
And she was started because as an MP, not to turn a fun conversation dark, but you see some stuff. You see some hard stuff. And, and I grew up loving sci-fi, loving X-Men and everything. I played video games nonstop growing up. One of my favorites growing up was Halo, and the Spartans. So the camaraderie of reading the Halo books, because I read the original 3 Halo books, Virgil Team was strongly inspired by them initially about this team that can come together despite the odds, that has these abilities and wants to make the difference. Kia was inspired, and she was the first before I even had the term evolved ones created.
Mm.
She was my man. If I could make a difference, if I could really make a difference, I'd be able to do this. Or if I did this, I could make a difference here. And that's why I came up with her ability to heal and to talk telepathically. But I also didn't want her to be exactly like an X-Men, or like a Superman, where she's completely, can go all day doing all these things. There's a cost to everything she does. When she heals, it drains her own strength. When she does these abilities, it does have an effect on her. She's not inhuman. She just has this extra ability to do something. And as Virgil Team went on, I wanted to expand on what Kia was. I didn't want her to be the Superman in a world that didn't have Superman, you know. So I toyed around with what she was and what to call her for a long time until I figured out the evolved ones. And my inspiration for them, if you read the book, you'll see a lot. Virgil Team's based off of Dante's Inferno. Virgil.
Oh, nice.
Yes, there's a few classical references in there to Dante's Inferno. Poseidon Team, Ajax Team. Those are all the different team names. They're all pulled from some kind of lore. And so each team, my plan is to have some kind of evolved one introduced that plays into. Some people strongly believe in psychics. Some people believe people can tell the future, believe in empaths, things like that. My goal with the evolved ones is to be those people in the background that we know exist, but we don't really give credit to existing. And that they're the reason behind the legends, like with mermaids. For my next evolved one, she's going to have the ability to stay underwater for prolonged periods, not because she's a mermaid, but she just has that ability. And that was my inspiration. Go ahead.
I was going to say, taking like an actual embodiment of the lore and just kind of mixing it with a person, but that capability or the lore is imprinted on the person type of a thing. It sounds like.
Like where does legend and myth come from? A grain of truth somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool, man. So does each team have like one evolved one into it? Because you're saying your next team, the evolved one from that team, is going to be the mermaid. So is it like, are you thinking that like you're going to focus on one evolved one specifically with each one of these books?
I'm still kind of toying with how I want to do it. Mm-hmm. I don't believe in the perfect universe books where every time you read a book, you can predict, this is what's going to happen. So I'm toying with how I want to do it. For Poseidon Team, I picked them because I did briefly touch on them a little bit in Virgil Team, the first book. I'm going to bring them into the second book. My plan is for, if I do start writing spinoffs of each team, for there to be an evolved one somehow integrated into the book, whether or not that person's already a part of the team, is saved by the team, if it's one person, if it's many people, I'm still kind of fleshing those ideas out as I go.
So there's no necessarily guideline one for one. You may see one of your books and you may see like 4 evolved ones get mentioned or come in and out of the story or whatever.
Perhaps. And they're all going to be varying abilities. They're not all going to be super strong. One may just be a slight empath, but even still, because they try not to ruin everything for whoever might be interested. Sure. But what creates the evolved ones is going to be the theme of the stories, of why they are so special and so, the topic of conversation when it comes to the books.
With you doing this, and I'm asking just because we're doing the next film project that we're going to, haven't even written it yet. It's like very early, like just like brainstorming phase, but it's going to be a possession story, but the way that the possession takes place is it's transferred through like magic. So like we're using like Potter wands that they're going to possess each other with, but the whole concept of what it is to be possessed, we're kind of screwing with the magic wands, but once they're possessed, it's very much like a traditional exorcist movie. Mm-hmm. And so with you creating this world as an author, like if someone is a psychic per se, are you calling them a psychic, or are you coming up with like your own verbiage for what your world would refer to that person as?
I'd say I'm doing a little bit of both.
Okay.
Because as Virgil Team starts, the concept of the evolved ones is new to this universe.
Okay.
He is the first one to really come out of the shadows. They're not as numerous as the X-Men.
Hmm.
But as people discover that they exist, they start to want them, and they start, you know, everybody starts creating names for them. Like the evolved ones is a term that I'm going to have a person come up with to try to explain what Kia is. And
Gotcha.
then even in the book, he is trying to explain her own abilities to the team. And she says, this is what I call it in my own head because I've never explained it to someone before. So I think I'm, in a way, using what terminology we use in today's world or the real world to
Hmm.
explain the ability, but they will probably have their own names to explain it as well for the universe.
Do you? So I know when I'm coming up because the concept, like the reason why I'm asking you these kind of questions, because I think it's more fun to do that kind of thing where you get to come up with like the terms, you get to like sandbox your own story.
Yes.
But then with that comes the thing that I always found out because I mean, you met Donna on the cruise too. Donna is definitely my harshest critic when it comes to call it like a pitch meeting or whatever. But I always have like three or four people that I say like, how does this sound, or is like, is this does this sound cool or does this sound really dumb? Because I think it sounds cool, but that doesn't mean it's not actually really dumb. Do you have like a team of people that you like were pitching, like whether it be a name of a thing that you're coming up with on the fly to like the entire like outline of the story? Do you got like a board of directors, as it were, that you run your stuff by before it's the you kind of really start going at it?
Well, for those who can watch the video, one of them was just on my lap, which would be the cat Nala.
Right on.
Reading aloud is one of my first things I do
Mm.
because it all sounds fine and dandy in your head. And then the moment you say it aloud, I'm like, wow, that sounds so stupid. Like, I absolutely hate that when I read it aloud now. My second one is my husband, who I'm sure knows more about Virgil Team than most, simply because I bored him to death rereading every chapter. Or I would reread the same sentence and then the one word, and he'd look at me and he'd go, "What do you want to know about the word?" And I'm like, "Does it sound dumb?" "Yes, it sounds dumb. Move on." My husband was a Marine, so being a critic is definitely his strong suit. He doesn't sugarcoat anything. I'm very grateful for that. So there's him. And I have a few friends who enjoy video games and sci-fi and things like that. Because a lot of some of my storyline is pulled from video games. Like if anybody is familiar with Metal Gear Solid, one of my characters in it is inspired by Ocelot.
Okay.
Um, so some of the terms I hear I've pulled from video games and then kind of put a spin on for myself. But yeah, definitely the reading aloud test and then reading to people who I know enjoy those genres.
Mm.
Sometimes I'll read it and they'll go, "Okay, what are you trying to say with it?" And I'll explain, and they go, "Oh, okay. If you explain that, then I think that word looks great." And then other times it's a no go from the beginning. Like evolved ones, for the longest time, I had no idea what to call Kia. I was just calling her the person with abilities, and I went and my husband, of course, also being a fellow sci-fi fan and stuff, he's like, "Just call them mutants." I was like, "No, that's already taken. I can't call them mutants. It's not happening."
Right. Right.
Um, I actually hated the term the evolved ones for a while, and it was actually just my placeholder until I started reading the term to some people. Like I said, my friends who read sci-fi books, and they're like, "Why don't you just stick with that? That's actually it makes the point for what your story is, and it sounds
Mhm.
interesting and intriguing, and I want to know more." So, but yeah, evolved ones was one of those words that I hated initially, and it was actually thanks to my panel of people who fall in the genre that helped me work it out.
The thing about that is that that happens, I think, more often than what you would think it should. Like I know there's been, at least 4 or 5 different things over film or podcasts that I have thought about and said out loud and have been like, no, that's really stupid. And I know that they are now permanent things that are part of our channel. I can't think of them. Like there's like the Campfire, one of our highest rated podcasts is called the Campfire Chronicles. And we called it the Campfire Chronicles because it was originally a tribute show to Are You Afraid of the Dark? Have you ever watched Are You Afraid of the Dark?
I think I've seen an episode or two, but it hasn't been recently.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's an old show, but the premise of it was they were telling ghost stories around a campfire.
Mm-hmm.
And then each of them was like a different story. And so we would watch an episode and then we would do an after show. And we were just basically recapping the show that was a part of our childhood. And that podcast has evolved into something completely different than that. But we have kept the name Campfire Chronicles. So it's like it makes absolutely no sense anymore to what the show actually is, but we're not going to get rid of it. It's just something like that sometimes that ends up becoming like this thing that you actually kind of cherish.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of part of your thing. And so it may be a character that's in your series or, something that the characters use or do or whatever that when you originally came up with it, it's like so stupid. But now it's, 3, 4 books in, you're going to like look back on it and be like, that's a pivotal thing.
For sure. I know I get that a lot with some of my characters. For the first people who read my book, I'd ask them who their favorite character was. And I was always shocked at who it was because that person was actually meant to be a throwaway character initially. They weren't meant to have the limelight and they weren't meant to be as prominent as they were. But as I wrote, I just kind of, as some writers say, that the character talked to me. And I liked where it was going, but I find it funny. Like you said, later on down the road, I'm looking at it and I'm like, you don't even realize this person wasn't even supposed to do half the shit they did. They weren't supposed to go this far. And then I have some people who like a character I only talk about for 1 chapter and they want to know if he's coming back. So it's like you said, you never know what'll stick, but I'm happy to get that feedback because it makes you excited for what you've created.
Yeah, that character, the first one that you mentioned, it almost sounds like, I don't know, are you a fan of Star Wars? Do you like the Star Wars movies?
Yes.
So that first character you mentioned is almost like your own Poe Dameron.
Yeah.
Which if you've ever listened to Oscar Isaac, he's like, they were going to kill me in The Force Awakens, and I begged to not die until at least the second one. And then they ended up like making him a pivotal part. So it almost sounds like that kind of thing happened with that first character you mentioned where they weren't going to be necessarily the biggest, but now they are kind of like a pivotal part to the overarching story, which is kind of cool to see develop. And the overall story that you have created in this world, do you think that each of these books is going to be with it being like a different team, do you see it as a series that one could pick up any of the books and read them and have it make sense? Or do you recommend, coming into it with, uh, the first book and then going chronologically?
So that's a good question. And it's a 2-part yes and no answer.
Okay.
Because Virgil Team itself, like I said, I'm very attached to them because they're the ones that started it. Actually, initially, if I'm being honest, Virgil Team was supposed to be 1 book, but I really enjoyed the story I was writing. And sorry, my cat's trying to take the spotlight.
That's all right.
I really enjoyed the book I was writing and the story it was creating. I didn't want to end it. So Virgil Team itself, I would say you'd need to start with it because it's going to be a 2 to 3 book for Virgil Team themselves, because Virgil Team is the team that
Okay.
he is on. For the other teams, I'm going to have them branch in and out of Virgil Team's 3-book series. But I'm going to say once I start writing those offshoots, you could probably pick those up without reading the Virgil Team series, and it'd be fine. I'm planning for the other ones to be like when I write Poseidon's own book, they're going to be their own. They'll have their start in the second Virgil Team book, but you should be able to pick up that book without having read the second book.
Are you going to, or do you think maybe you won't know until that time comes? But you, like you just said, you're going to introduce them in the second Virgil Team book. Do you think after the Virgil Team book, the second one, you will then pause Virgil Team and do that Poseidon Team book, or are you going to do the third Virgil Team book before you dive into the Poseidon Team? Or are you just going to kind of wait and see how you feel?
It's a good question. I have to say, I'm not really an outliner. I'm a by the pantser, I think, is the type of writing person I'm
Okay,
called.
that's
Um,
fair.
my my goal really is to write the 3 Virgil Team books,
Mhm.
and then I actually have 2 other ideas. One really big one that I really want to write. It's a fantasy novel. It would be a single standalone novel, and it's
Mm,
just been in the back of my head for months. And I want to write it so bad, but I also want to finish Virgil Team.
mm,
So I might, again, depending on my creative mood, though, because I am getting excited about Poseidon Team because I'm having to flesh them out for book 2. I'm getting
mm.
excited about their story. So I might very well, after I finish book 2, I might want to keep that energy and excitement about them going and write their story and then write
Sure.
the third Virgil Team. Or I might go ahead and finish Virgil just so I can get to my fantasy book and then come back to Poseidon.
The It's funny to like hear that because that's almost how I read. Like I will get into a series of books and just be in love with this series of books and want to finish the series of books. And then a second series could be from the same author can get my attention. And it's like I will pick up the first book of that new series and just want so badly to just start that other series. But I can't do it. I have to finish like the whole series before I can start a second series. I can't do multiple books at the same time. I know a bunch of people who do that, and I don't know how they do it. I gotta.
Yeah, no, I do the same thing. If I start, that's why I have one series in my library I want to reread because the authors put out the 15th book in the series.
Geez.
But when I read a series, I want to read that series because I'm in the mindset of those characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how I feel about writing is right now I'm in the mindset of these characters, so I want to continue them. That's why as much as I want to finish writing Virgil Team Saga, I'm now that I've written the characters that are going to be part of Poseidon Team and I'm in their headspace, I'm really excited about Poseidon Team and I want to give them their story now.
That's awesome. That's definitely got to be a great feeling. Besides, instead of having zero ideas, having a plethora of ideas is definitely a exciting feeling. And knowing that the thing that is, the biggest factor is just being able to, make sure that you have the story that you want to tell out there and then putting it out there. But that's great that the fans of the Virgil Team book that is available have a great amount of stories to come within this world, and that you are stoked to be able to share those stories is super rad, man. So that is very very cool.
I appreciate
Um,
it.
the best place for everybody to get the book is on Amazon, the link that you shared with us.
Yep, it's on Amazon. It's also available on Barnes and Nobles.
Oh, okay.
And yep. And I'd also appreciate going back to your comment, your very first question. We'll circle all the way back about publishing on Amazon. It's easy, but you need 25 reviews to actually start showing up on any of their lists that people search. So if anybody who reads it can just take a moment, I don't even care if it's a bad review. I would really appreciate a review on Amazon.
So now explain how significant that actually is. So until you have the 25 reviews, like the way to get it on Amazon is you click the direct link. Is that like what happens, or
No,
what do you
you
mean by
can
that?
still search it. But what I mean is, if you type in Virgil Team, my book will pop up. If you type in Bonnie Blevins, it will pop up. What I mean is their actual search engine. So if you type in military sci-fi, because my book hasn't had 25 reviews, it won't start populating in those kind of searches.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah, it's something Amazon does, I guess, to verify that it's, not a scam book or a book that actually has some backing behind it or something like that. But
Once you
25
hit
is the
the
magic number.
once you hit the 25 reviews, does it like pop up in a bunch of different searches then? Like would it
As
be
far as I
military
know,
sci-fi? Okay. So that is like we will post the links to Bonnie's book in the show notes and whatnot, but we will kind of put it on all you guys to help us share that info so we can get her to the 25 mark. If you have already read it, go back and just click the link and leave a review. Or if you're thinking about checking it out, or if you are reading it currently and enjoying it, do us a favor and leave her a review so she can hit the 25 mark and get even more exposure there on Amazon. But Bonnie, thank you for taking the time to be on our show, and we are stoked to check the book out, and we will look forward to seeing even more from the world that you are building.
thank you. I really appreciate the time and I appreciate your viewers a lot. Thank you all.
No problem.